Hi, everyone. So we are gonna be getting started with the this month's narrative medicine rounds. Um, before we start, I would like to go over a few things. First of all, let me say good evening. I am Silvia Amesty, and I will be your host this evening at Narrative Medicine Rounds. On behalf of the Division of Narrative Medicine at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, I welcome those of you who are joining rounds for the first time, and welcome back all returning attendees. Narrative medicine arose at Columbia in 2001 and is now an international movement at the intersection of humanities, the arts, clinical practice, and healthcare justice. Narrative training equips clinicians to humbly try to comprehend their patients' experiences and perspectives so as to deliver equitable and effective healthcare. Rigorous training and practice of narrative medicine helps all those interested in person-centered, respectful healthcare to deepen their self-awareness, clinical attunement, collaborative skills, and creative capabilities. Our commitments to healthcare justice underlie our writing, teaching, research, advocacy, and delivery of care. The narrative medicine community assembles monthly at rounds to grow our knowledge, partnership, and commitment to a just and effective healthcare future. So before we introduce our speaker for tonight, I've been asked to mention a few basic Zoom ground rules to ensure the program goes smoothly. First, keep your microphones muted to cut down on background noise during the program. Um, Also be forewarned that if there's any disruptions or inappropriate comments in the chat, you may be removed from the event. We're going to lock the meeting in a few minutes for security reasons. If you leave the meeting or your connection is broken after we lock the meeting, you will not be able to return to the meeting. However, please know that after the event, a day or two later, you are going to get an email with a link to a recording of the event. So you will be able to watch in its entirety at that time. In the unlikely event that we have a Zoom intrusion, we will terminate the event right away. Unfortunately, we have done everything we can to make sure there will be no interruptions. But if there is, you will get a new link in your inbox to a new session as quickly as we can administer one. During the talk, we ask people to keep chat interactions to a minimum. As we get closer to the Q&A part of the event, we will invite you to submit questions via chat for our speaker, but before then, we won't be monitoring questions. So please save your questions to type into the chat after we make the announcement. The event is being recorded. As mentioned, everyone will get the link to it a day or two after the event, and you can share as you wish. Captioning will not be available during tonight's event, but will be provided with the recording. At the end, we'll have the link to the online bookstores to order books or find more information about the speaker and about the Department of Medical Humanities and Ethics and the program in narrative medicine. So now I would like to welcome now Kayhan Irani. As you have been reading in the bio, is an Emmy-award winning writer, a performer, and a theater of the oppressed trainer. She creates art to build community, to engage audiences in social justice issues, and to offer spaces for healing. For the sake of time, there's a lot that we can say about Kayhan, but we want to listen to what she has to say. So I'm not going to read her lengthy bio, but she's an incredibly accomplished person. And I just wanted to introduce her also by talking about how we met. Kayhan and I met last year. And it was during this meeting with Catherine Rogers, who's present, and Rita Sharon, who's the director of the program, and I. And Rita and I have been really interested in learning about the theater of the oppressed, a form of community-based approach that uses theater as a tool for social change. And this was created by the Brazilian Augusto Boal. I've been working on a teaching project as a 2021-2022 Provost Senior Faculty Teaching Scholar. And my idea was really to address how implicit bias can produce health disparities in general. So when we met Kayhan, I reached to her right away, and I asked her to, please work with me because I think this will be a wonderful, way to perhaps try to have conversations about implicit bias with students. And so we started this collaboration and it has been wonderful. Recently, and I have to say more that she guided us in developing an interprofessional workshop, for health science students. That was sort of our pilot study or pilot project to see how we can integrate the theater of the press methodology or exercises to teach, about implicit bias. So I'm going to just briefly read some of the comments from the students because I think the results of the workshop were quite interesting. We're very positive, and I'll just read a couple, and then I have a question for Kayhan. Some of the students said, we cannot judge people without looking deeper into their story. That was after the workshop. Another one said, there are many things we as people assume others from body language. It's important for us to be aware of our implicit biases and provide a welcoming environment for the patients. Then I read one more. There was one comment that stuck with me after this workshop about how much we fill in the blanks of what goes on around us with our own assumptions, using our own cultures and experiences. This workshop made me realize how just much nonverbal communication occurs subconsciously and how important body language is in everyday communication. So I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised how the workshop, ended up going. I mean, I facilitated this workshop with another a social worker that has been a friend of mine for years. And I just wanted to ask Kayhan, how can such simple games give us, or gave the students in this case, such insights in a 2-hour workshop?
That's a great question. And hello, everyone. I'm just so pleased to be here and so pleased to see all the places on this earth that you're sitting in this room from. So thank you for taking your time at night or late night to be here. And thank you so much, Silvia, and all the folks at the Narrative Medicine program for being so welcoming and so kind. And in fact, that someone like you, Silvia, who's so accomplished, would really want to work together on this is such an honor. And it's really been a delight to partner with you and to be in conversation with you, being in the learning community with you. So I would say that the theater of the oppressed, for those who are not so familiar with it, is a technique that was developed in Brazil by Augusto Boal, who was a theater director and an activist, and who was active during the time of the military dictatorship. And Boal himself was a student of Paulo Freire, who developed an educational method, popular education, a method to look at how we teach and learn. What are the conditions in which our learning is structured, and what are all the implicit biases in the way teaching and learning is done, particularly the way and the methods and how we teach as a way of replicating hierarchical structures that basically tell people to obey. And Boal took these ideas and adapted them to theater. And mostly the theater of the oppressed relies on the kind of foundational games and exercises that are under the lexicon of image theater, which is nonverbal. So in a Western kind of a structure, a Western idea of theater, you rely on the script. It's about reading and it's about the written word. And in fact, all traditional cultures, all cultures around the world, theater really comes out of dance, comes out of the body. It doesn't necessarily come off of the page. It's not a literacy-based activity. And Boal, of course, being Brazilian and being exposed and in touch with different cultural forms of theater, understood this and focused on the body. And so the body, as you said, Silvia, is a very, very powerful tool. You all here are people focused on the body, on wellness, on bringing the body into balance. And And yet when we think about education, education is so much about separating the mind from the body, is so much about cutting off our understanding and the knowledge that we hold in our body, the sensations that we feel every day that give us information about the situation that we're in. And for people of color and for people who experience oppression and experience marginalization and experience harm, the body is a very, very powerful place, mechanism, teacher to tell us something's wrong, something's going on, something doesn't feel right, something is up. And yet in order to participate in an oppressive society, we definitely have to not listen to our body. We definitely have to stuff our feelings away, stuff the expression that our body is trying to bring forth away, and focus on the frameworks that we are taught. And the frameworks that we are taught are frameworks that are inherited from hierarchical systems that maybe don't love everyone, maybe don't believe in everyone's minds, maybe don't believe in the inherent goodness and creativity of all people. And so Boal took these ideas of education and in a way decolonizing and unpacking education, unlearning, how do we learn? He did the same thing for theater, unlearning, how do we do theater? Who gets to be creative? Who gets to be the director, right? Who gets to be expressive and beautiful and talented? And he popularized it. He said, we all do. And in fact, we need this form of communication if we are to create the society that we want. And so that is also building on a kind of lineage of theater, the way people use theater as an analogy or as a metaphor. So Shakespeare said art is a mirror to nature. And then Bertolt Brecht said, theater is not a mirror to nature, it is a hammer with which we can shape a reality. And Boal says theater is a mirror, but it's a magic mirror, one that we can reach in and change the image to one that we desire. And so I build on that in a way that really looks at theater mirror as a way of paying attention, really just paying exquisite attention to what is there and what are the layers of what is there. And so that includes what we see, that includes what we feel, all the sensations inside our body. And that includes how we've been taught to see and how we've been taught to feel, how we've been taught to see what we're looking at. And these are kind of the fundamental things. You did the game Complete the Image, which is a metaphor for the Paulo Freire methodology, to see, to analyze, and to act. And when we're asking about seeing, we also then have to ask about, why do you see what you see? Who taught you to see what you see? What are you not looking at when you're labeling something? Because it's not so often in again, our society, in the ways that we teach and learn, we are taught to take on someone else's lens. And these are deeply, deeply socially constructed lenses. These are deeply constructed with histories of justifying oppression and justifying marginalization of people. And so when we go through these activities, we immediately go to the attention and the information that our body gives us. And so in a 2-hour workshop, people get to actually open up and say all the things that they, are told not to say, to feel and acknowledge all the things that they are told not to acknowledge in a professional setting. And in that way, start to bring their bodies, their minds, their selves, and their social conscience into alignment. One of the hardest things to live in an oppressive society is to look away from injustice, is to look away and go back to the status quo. Yet that's what we're constantly taught, every single one of us, even those who come from marginalized backgrounds, even me, I have to, on some level, turn it off if I am to operate. Yet what are the ways in which we can bring our bodies into micro adjustments, micro changes, so that we can pay more exquisite attention, so that we can be present to what we are seeing, what we are feeling, and what the right next move is. Not that an answer has to come from that, not that some prescriptive demand has to come from that. A deeper understanding, a deeper knowing of self in relation to the society and the conditions that created us and to where we are right now.
Yes, and that was very obvious when we did the workshop. But one of the things that I was most surprised, it was how you know, students are very used to very traditional teaching methods. You get there, it's all about verbal communication. We hardly did any talking in that workshop, and I just like, you know, enacted all the exercises that you had put together, and we have practiced with you, and it just worked out. And I was like, well, first of all, that's the first piece that I was very you know, very surprised by. Not so much because I knew it was going to work, but I mean, to see it at work, it was really impressive. But
It
also,
delights me. I'm sorry, it just makes me so happy.
no, it's wonderful. But one thing that I wanted to talk to you, that I wanted you to talk about some more, was I was very impressed with the workshop organization, because it was very it was so purposeful in the way that it worked. Like the exercises led each other into the combination of it, which I thought that you know, it was not random. We could have done it.
Knowing and understanding. I am a mother to a 3-year-old at the moment, you know, and all like 99% of his expression is body language. You know, he's very, very verbal, yet, you know, everything I feel and can understand about what he wants, what he doesn't want, is told through the body and through sound. This is something we have to relearn, because again, we get cut off from it. And so coming back to it is a very natural thing, as long as we're given permission. But yes, the exercises are done in a way, and they're structured, of course, based on each audience, based on each group that I'm working with, to help them make their way back. Because we have been told, I mean, from elementary school, primary school onwards, to cut off from our bodies, sit still, listen. When you are learning, you are sitting, you are focused, right? You're not moving, you're not in dance and dynamic movement with others. That's not learning. And so we self-censor. Even we start to say, oh, I don't know how to use my body, or no, I won't, or I can only use it in certain ways, you know. So in again, a learning space, my body is not to be used. In a dancing and a fun space, my body can be used. So the activities have to be scaffolded to welcome back that knowing and welcome back that play into the body. And so sometimes it's done, you know, just by starting by saying your name and doing a movement, or saying your name and making a sound, right? Because sounds, even the abstract sound, can be as, you know, strange to someone as a body gesture. And slowly going from that deeper into the work, and also layering. So the part of the work is the layering of the process and the questioning. That we don't just do one game, leave it alone, we do another game, somehow magically people come up with the comments that you just read. It's by layering in themes, layering in questions that match kind of the inner dynamic, that match the intention of what movement and what gestures we're starting to make, to help expand again and explore and put some space in between, again, ourselves and our conditioning, starting to come back to ourselves as humans, starting to not see ourselves through conditioning, or only as determined by the conditioning that we've experienced, but truly to experience ourselves as humans, fully human, with all the potential and possibilities to connect and love and communicate with each other and to understand. And Augusto Boal also talks about this in some of his books. He says that, you know, theater is some of the first art that humans made, because the subjunctive tense, the tense of saying, I would, I should, if I could, I would, is the act of doing theater. You're imagining yourself in a scenario that has not yet happened, or maybe that has happened, but you want to amend it. And so you're watching yourself be another self in a future place. This he talks about in The Rainbow of Desire, which talks about internalized oppression. Again, the way in which our conditioning lodges within ourselves and we believe it as our true self. But I love that he kind of places theater as something that happens within our heads. Because this is also something I'm exploring in my recent work, is the intimate audience of one, is gathering intention and gathering your attention inward to look at your own life, to look at the experiences that have formed you, the knowledge that has made you who you are, and the ways in which you've had to shape yourself to fit in. or to become a professional or to do what you think it is, that you wanted to do. And all the ways we can step out of that. We can mend and we can create a dynamic of healing through stepping out of that and stepping back into ourselves. And so these years I've been obsessed with this notion of a micro gesture. Maybe a micro gesture is like the way your heart flutters when someone says something, or a little swirl in your stomach when you see something. So those are even the tiny ways in which I'm seeing theater nowadays, rather than on a big proscenium. And of course, having a baby in 2019 helped me to get small, and unfortunately, having COVID helped me to get small and really intimate. And I mean, not having COVID myself, having COVID in the world has enabled me to really stop and understand the power of paying attention.
Yeah, that's fascinating what you're saying, because I think and specifically with the work that we do as healthcare providers, one of the questions that I've had for many years is how do I get myself and how do I get my students or my residents to really step in and step out, as you're saying, step in, step out and look and observe yourself and get to know the self, get to know what makes you, what builds you, and be able to step out and see where is that coming from and what do you do with it. It's not about having to erase your entire experience in life, but it's more about awareness.
Yeah.
So actually one of the games that brought that up very strongly was the name game that we played, and for example, some of the students were talking about that game, and they were talking about how one of them spent so many years trying to unlearn internalized colonial ideas, including the concept of a difficult name. So that this person was having a real difficulty with her name, and actually she had a hard time coming up and talking about it because she was afraid of the reaction that she was going to get, like all the things that her name implied. And that's a very simple example to what you're saying. So yeah, I see how, but I wasn't expecting that the students were going to really get it right away and just play along with what we were doing, which was kind of amazing. It was really I don't know, it was illuminating. So yeah, so can you say more about this idea of naming, categorizing, which seemingly it's like we do a lot, but we don't seem to really understand.
Wow, I mean, how much time do we have left?
Well, we have
I'm teasing you.
Yeah,
also, friends, I welcome you to ask questions or comments in the chat. We'll move to that, in a moment, to hearing your questions and what you want to hear more about. So please do that. And thank you, Philippa. The body does know. Again, like our brain is lodged in our body. It is part of our body, so again, the way we talk, at least in English, right? English is the language I'm fluent in. I speak best. And the way in which we talk about mind body, I don't understand. Like, the mind is your body. It is in your body. It is part of your body. So of course it has its effect and its ways of cognition and telling you and shaping you, and the body also, the other parts of your body also inform that. What I'll say about that is about labeling. I mean, all systems of control are based on these binary labels of extraction so that we can determine who is worthy and who is unworthy, what has value in our society, what doesn't have value in our society. And there are all these ways in which we label these things to make sense so that we can shift them around, place value, and play chess. This is under a scarcity mindset of saying that, there's limitation on what we have, there's limitation on this earth, there's limitation on human capacity to love and connect. And so we have to have this hierarchy of what's appropriate and what's not. And of course, again, like from watching children, from raising a child, you know, that each being on this earth is born completely unique with all the gifts and capacities to understand and do whatever it is that they were put on this earth to do. How can we have systems that allow each person to fully come into that? That no person would say, you know, I'd love to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm just not able to because people don't see me as smart enough or don't see me as valuable enough. And I find in this ways, the field of medicine and the field of theater are very similar, in that they both fields and practitioners in both fields truly believe that it is a field, you know, maybe with the least bias. It is the field that, you know, most people can access because everyone has to be treated medically. And, you know, with the arts, everyone can imagine and be creative. Yet these are also the fields that have tremendous forms of control and biases that leave people out. They have tremendous disparities, right? So we have tremendous medical disparities. If this is an open field where, of course, everyone has a body and everyone needs to be treated, and, you know, disease and wellness is part of every single, you know, human organism, and we all need to know about that, then everyone should be treated the same. Similarly to the arts, you know, if everyone has the capacity to be creative and to imagine, then we wouldn't have to have these conversations about representation in the arts and who should be seen as the hero and the heroine. So it is also to be honest, to again see and start to unlearn. How has our expertise been penned in by these labels? How has our own potential as professionals, as special, as hyper educated as we are, how has our own potential actually been penned in by this idea of specialness, by this idea of extraordinary knowledge, so much so that we can't even see what we don't know. And so naming is such an important part of that. Understanding naming is such an important part of that. Understanding why, you know, we have these feelings or why we have these reactions to names or certain things is so important to that. And just listening and understanding. You know, I may not understand when you tell me the first time, but it's something I need to sit with and listen to, maybe a little bit more. I'm having work done in my apartment, and the worker was trying to show me something. He showed me a photo, and I just didn't know what I was looking at. I was like, what, you know, I knew what he was telling me. Okay, this is a piece of the wall. This is some mold growing on the wall. But I had no idea what he was showing me. I was like, can you please explain? So he had to sit and talk about, this is it. And this is, we put it on the floor and then we did this. So he had to give me the story of the photo so I could understand what it was I was looking at. And I think so much about the systems that people have to practice medicine in don't allow for that understanding, don't allow for that depth of storytelling and knowledge. And this is why this entire program is so necessary, is that we all need to understand each other with a lot more depth and a lot more time, so that we can get closer to what it is we're looking at and what it is that's then needed. Yeah, and I mean, there's so much more to say, but I would also love to hear from folks who are listening. Catherine
Yes,
has
so I have a couple of questions here that some other people are asking. Catherine Rogers asked this question about, can you describe one of the games, for example, including the effect of on participants? I guess I guess one of the games that we use 4 different games in the workshop, and maybe you can describe one of them. So I think that's what some of the audience is asking. They want to get an idea what we did in that workshop. So yeah, and I would be curious about that too if I were.
But I wasn't there, so I can't explain. Catherine's asking the effect on the participant, so you would say that
you
part.
can explain the game and I can explain the effect.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
And Philippa also says, to share more about making connections between theater-based or body-based experience and everyday life practice of unlearning and tuning words. So these are related. These are totally related. Like I said, the main activity that Silvia did in the workshop was called Complete the Image, which is a metaphor for the Paulo Freire methodology, to see, to analyze, to act. And what it is that two people come into the space. So the audience or the participants all sit on one side, and there's like a theater space or playing space. And two volunteers come, they face each other, they shake hands, and they freeze. And then the facilitator says, okay, let's imagine there's a little frame drawn around these two people shaking hands. Let's objectively look at it. What do you see in this image that everyone else can see? And so there are two people shaking hands. One is taller than the other. One has long hair, one has short hair. They both have their toes pointed forwards. One has their hand behind their back. Things like this that everyone can see. And then we slowly get into subjective. However, when we start to talk about objective, you see, I even made that mistake. I was going to say, oh, they're standing very close together. Well, that's subjective. And so then when you start to say, how many of you think they're standing close together? Some will say, I do. Some will say, no, I don't think so. Right. So we start to fine tune and get to look at, again, how are we looking at, what are the cultural ways in which I think, I'm very, my culture, the way I was raised also, we were raised in a very small apartment. We shared a lot of space. I lived in a very working class neighborhood. People were very comfortable with being close to each other. So sometimes people think that I'm being too close, and I don't think so at all, right? Or I'll see two people standing and shaking hands, and I think, oh, they're pretty far apart. That must mean a formal relationship. Must mean they don't know each other, or they don't like each other, or they're trying to keep some space. And some people say, oh no, they look like they know each other. They're close together. So this is the very basic thing. And then one of the participants steps out of the image while the other one is holding the same image they came in with. The participant who steps out goes around the image 360 degrees, goes around the participant who's frozen in space, and sees all the possibilities of re-entering the image, but in a new shape. So they don't enter back into the shaking hand position that they originally had. They enter into an entirely different position. The only thing they cannot do is they cannot change the position of the person who's frozen. But they enter in an entirely different position or gesture in order to change the story, try and create a new context of where you might be, what might be happening. And then the other person steps out and does the same. And you play this game over and over to kind of both enter into a dynamic of stepping in and stepping out, looking at what is, and then being in the image yourself, and then having, other people share their kind of projections of what they're seeing. And the more and more you do this, you realize that so much of what someone sees is a projection, that someone who has come in and said, oh, I took this image and I was hoping, this is what I intended. Maybe some people got that, and a whole lot of people didn't, right? A whole lot of people just projected what they thought they saw. And of course, then there are layers based on what I see as someone's gender identity, what I see as someone's racial identity. More and more, we start to see how these influence how we're seeing someone have more power or less power in a relationship based on their gender. Why? Based on their perceived race. Why? And this goes back to unlearning and tuning inwards, because our bodies both give us a lot of information when we're in a moment, when we're in an image, and we are also constantly projecting and making sense of other bodies. We are doing that all the time, whether we know it or not, whether we realize it. Our culture and the way, again, we were raised shapes that, and the way in which we were taught to see shapes that.
Just get election day.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about what happened in that room with that was full of health profession students coming from different areas. It was an interprofessional day. It's an event that the Department of Medical Humanities and Ethics holds every year. And so this workshop was interesting. It was nursing, students from nursing, medical school, public health. And this was the last exercise that we did. They were they were very curious about that. It was very difficult to keep them to talk about just the objective. They kept going to the subjective. And what was most interesting was a lot of the students were talking about what they were seeing, and other students were surprised that what others saw, they didn't even think about. It's like they realized that they had their own process, and you know, everybody else had seen something completely different, which already was a revelation for a lot of them, that, oh, wait, we don't see things, you know, that's not objective. And I'm not seeing something that is objective, that is actually rather subjective, because even in the objective, there is some subjectivity, you know, and the way that they look at height instead of looking at hands or looking at feet or looking at legs. You know, why do you look at that and first, and other people look at other things first? So that made them think about, like, I see the world in a very specific way, and I realize that's a very personal, that has to do a lot with my own experience. And I think that was one of the biggest points that they got out of that exercise. You know, you were talking about the exercise, and you talk about like the free exercise without having a theme, like, because then we had the opportunity to do exactly the same thing, but asking them the theme, like, create an image of compassion is the one that we used. And then we invited 3 people to participate. And then we changed the image several times with my other facilitator. And that was even more interesting because it was related to something so specific as compassion, which is something that is so central to practicing medicine or working with patients in any other capacity in the health professions. So yeah, so
Hey,
that's what
Hi,
very interesting.
You were talking to.
Lorraine.
Yeah. And you and I talked a lot about, you know, what had happened in terms of, you know, how the students really were very, they were very participative, and they were, even though what we were asking them was kind of strange, you know, if you see it from an outsider point of view and you don't know what, you know, what you're trying to get at, they were very, they were very trusting, and they were very willing to follow the facilitator. But I think what helped, it was the structure, all the way the exercises were
Yes,
layered.
100%. I mean, I wouldn't do that game first, because it does bring up all the potential of, like, well, who's seeing me, who's judging me based on what I'm saying. The beauty of it also, though, is just what you said, is that we do this in collaborative and community context, so that we can understand that we all come with a spectrum of perspectives, and that's okay. Yet it's the way we assign value judgment to, again, discern who's worthy, who's unworthy, who deserves my time, who deserves my attention, who doesn't. That's the stuff we want to challenge. Not that individuals will have different positionalities based on where they come from, how they were raised, you know, all the different backgrounds they come from. That is going to give us different perspectives, but that will inform each of our perspectives as we go forward. If we can take that information and say, okay, knowing that, you know, these 20 people, there are all these 20 different perspectives, how do we make the change that we all agree on based on our values, right? Based on what we want to see in this field, in this world. And so I think, thank you for John, for saying that, you know, it does give you permission to witness. Witnessing is a very, very important part of this work, witnessing self and others. And that is definitely what I'm coming to see as audience, right? Gathering attention and gathering intention for where you want to put that attention is creating an audience for yourself or within a group, and an audience for an issue, right? An audience for the ways in which we're stuck by our social conditioning. So I think it's just the simplicity of that can be done over and over and over again, especially as the group gets more comfortable. Because one of the drawbacks in the work is that it's hard maybe for some people to honestly say what they're seeing, because they don't want to sound racist or they don't want to sound sexist. Yet we've all been programmed with a lot of, recordings, a lot of songs that have been on repeat, right? And so sometimes like we need to just say it because that's the song that's out there. It's in the narrative of our society. And so of course it's in the room. And so the more comfortable people can be, they can just name that. They can say, this is what I'm seeing. And we can understand that as one of the perspectives that's in the room, so that we're also not saying again, like, oh, we're going to create a utopian vision right here. Because Boal was all about working from the conditions that exist. We can't work from what isn't here. And that's also why I love this work, is that it asks us to locate ourselves. We can't make change outside of the roles and the space that we have. I cannot make change as, the head of a hospital can. I can make a different type of change in my own life. Someone else can make a different type of change in their role. There are multiple social roles, including professional roles, right? And so that's why I love the work so much, is that it asks you to locate yourself very concretely and then say, from here, what do I feel comfortable doing? What do I feel capable of doing? And what should I do? Yeah.
Yeah, and I will read this comment that Rita just put, because I think it's interesting. She says so it's very freeing, especially for the participant who's asked to enter the image in a new way, and the group itself has to be generous in listening and accepting even what might seem to be like a strange response. So and what is interesting about that, and why I think Rita's comment is so on point, is that it's a freedom that they're not used to having either. Like it's freeing for the students or for the participant to adopt a position that they feel is expressing compassion or expressing something that they may not even know what it is exactly. But I don't think it's a freedom that we are always providing the students with. And so they I think they embraced it and really nicely in the workshop. So it's something that that I appreciate. I know we are in Q&A now because you need a few minutes for your exercise, Kayhan. So
yeah. Okay. I did want to just speak to this last question about the exercise about listening from Viviane, because she's in Brazil.
All right. Yes.
And yes, she's working with Forum Theater, which is a more advanced set of techniques, or just a more complex set of techniques, where you actually make plays, when you put on plays, where people can actually enter, the audience who are there can actually enter into the drama after it's played. But they're asking about, oh, sorry, I lost the chat. Suggest exercise that can help people develop their ability to listen to their patients. There is a whole series in Boal's games, in the Games for Actors and Non-Actors. That's the book. It's kind of like a workbook. It's a whole series of just activities you can play. In Games for Actors and Non-Actors, he has a whole series on listening or hearing. It's either hearing or listening. It's listening. I would actually say that rather than speaking directly to how to listen to your patients, right, rather than making something prescriptive about this is what you need to do, again, to be a good doctor, to be a good listener, you actually practice listening in all the fun and interesting ways that you can listen, and develop the focus and the attention that listening really takes. And so there's a whole series of games. One I really love is called Horseshoe Rhythms, where you have people standing in a kind of horseshoe, a U formation. And one person from one end of the horseshoe goes around and does a repetitive sound and movement all the way down the line. And then the next person comes and does a different one. And the next person comes and does a different one. You keep going this till everyone has gone, and the U keeps turning. But as the U keeps turning, you have like 4 or 5 different rhythms and sounds going together at the same time. And you have to focus on the person right in front of you and take that on and complete that rhythm until you receive the next one from the person in front of you. And then you go off and go. Anyway, but there's the whole series in there are listening techniques and games to play that deal with sound, rhythm, music, that I think can be really challenging and help to open a dimension of listening that people might help your students expand their notion of listening, rather than, again, a prescriptive way that one should listen, but let's play with all the ways we can listen, all the skills and all the body knowledge that we have to bring when we really, really are listening. So that's in that book, and there's a link. Thank you for the link.
Yes, that's wonderful. I don't know if you, well, we have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to do your exercise now.
Yeah, I was thinking we would just do like an internal, an activity that asks us to look internally and then come up with the body gesture and show each other the gestures. Does that feel okay?
Yeah.
All right, so I know people are in, in all different settings. So do this however you need to, but I would say, try to do it as fully as you can. So the first part is really just going to be closing your eyes or looking away and focusing inwardly. And today we have been speaking about disregarded knowledge, marginalization, being pushed aside, cutting ourselves off. So I just want you to take a few deep breaths here and breathe in any way you'd like. Just try and get as much air into your body as you can. And as you breathe, just notice the sensations in your body, in the different parts of your body, from your toes to the top of your head. And you can start to notice also any internal feelings, any micro gestures happening inside your body, tension being stored anywhere. And you can also pay attention to what feels good and relaxed and loose. And I'd like to ask you to think about your day so far. And maybe all the things you've had to push to the side in order to operate and to show up professionally or in any kind of role that you occupy. Maybe there are things you had to push to the side to be in this meeting right now. So I ask you to start to pay attention to it. Those things that you habitually might pull away from, might push away from you, might be feelings of grief or tenderness, might be anger or loneliness, whatever it is that you have to operate over. And even numbness can be something. You have to operate on top of numbness. And just keep breathing. Relax your nose and your face and your mouth. And as you allow this thing to be present, and as you sit with this thing as a friend, I'd like you to offer yourself a small gesture of care, of compassion, or of attention. And you can make the tiniest gesture of maybe just touching the tips of your fingers together, or you can move your arms in a certain way. But offer this part of yourself a gesture of exquisite care and kindness. And hold that gesture for a few breaths. And notice as you hold the gesture, anything shifting internally, any new sensations arising. And I want you to hold your gesture, but bring your attention back to the space, to the Zoom room. You can open your eyes, but hold your gesture. And now we're going to go into gallery view, and I'd love each of you to offer your gesture to your camera for others to see, and just hold it for, 30 seconds as best as you can. So maybe you had a really tiny gesture. But as best as you can, hold your gesture up and look at the other gestures around you. I have to let go of one of my hands, but this is my gesture. And look at the other gestures of people in the space as best as you can. So if you have to kind of go back and forth. Oh, this is exquisite. Hello, baby. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. All right. You have moved me to tears, everyone. Thank you for spending this hour together. All right, and you can release whenever you'd like to. And thank you for sharing in the chat your gestures if we weren't able to see you. Okay, everyone, I am holding you all in my heart. Thank you for spending this time with me, for opening up to these gestures for yourself and offering them for others. Silvia, you're muted.
Thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your amazing, incredible knowledge. And I have witnessed that myself, and I'm just so impressed and so amazed by your work and by what you do and how you face this work that you do. It's just so inspiring to me, and hopefully to all of us. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and I want to let you know that there be links to where you can learn more about Kayhan's work with Theater of the Oppressed. And we should be sharing that in the screen. Also, a recording of tonight's event will be shared later this week via email to all who registered. Tonight's rounds event concludes our 22-23 season of Narrative Medicine Rounds. So please enjoy your summer break, and we'll see you again in September when rounds resume. Unless someone else have something else to say. Thank you again to all of you for being here with Kayhan, accompanying her in this wonderful hour.